More, more on that a little later. But of course, I had to start with a joke. I mean, this is what you deserve. But it's also, that didn't come out right. Well, no. You deserve it because I believe they're really funny. Like, I believe wholeheartedly in my jokes. But it's also for some of you, this might give you a little idea of how to respond when we're all saying goodbye to each other back there in the by the doors. Because you see, it was about these people this group of friends who went to church, and quite honestly, they hadn't been to church in a while. And so on the way out, the pastor greets them and says, "It's so great that you are all here with us. You need to join the army of the Lord." And the individual said, "Well, no. We're already a part of the army of the Lord, Pastor." And the pastor said, "Well, wait a minute. How come I only see you during Christmas and Easter?" And they leaned in and they said, "We're part of the Secret Service." So some of you now have something to say to me on the way out. Well, you can just wink at me on your way out. How about that? But I have to tell you, I'm feeling pretty good right now. I am feeling pretty good, but yesterday afternoon was a little bit of a different story. I was feeling a little anxious. I was feeling a little nervous. I was in my feels about this morning. And I thought, okay, well, I need to do something with this, right? And so what am I going to do? And this being the first Sunday Easter talk that I give, I thought, well, let me go to see some of Reverend Chris's past Easter talks to just get inspired and just calm myself down. And of course, the first one that I find, like just a few moments into his talk, he says, "Easter, the biggest talk of the year." Like, oh. So that as you heard, I'm teaching a class with Reverend Anna, and I gave Reverend Anna a call yesterday afternoon to talk about it. And after we talked about the class, I said, "Anna, I'd love for some prayer because I'm feeling a little bit anxious about tomorrow." And kid you not, she literally said, "Because it's the biggest talk of the year?" So I got it. But what took place a little later in the evening is that I embraced it. I recognize that it is part of my own destiny to be standing here in front of you. And although I may be anxious, although I may have a little bit of nerves in it, although I may not fully sometimes comprehend where the power and the courage and the strength comes from, I trust that as I live my destiny and I step into it, that I am doing my part in being the light of Christ in the world. And it is a big talk, and I hope that it's a big talk for you because I really trust and I really believe that you can make this the most powerful Easter you've ever had. This can be the day where your new life begins. This is the day that you get to free yourself of that which has kept you playing small and really recognize that the Christ that is risen and the Christ that we celebrate today is the Christ light that is within you, and it's been implanted in us to be shared, to be expressed, and to be the blessing that we are to be in the world. And so you get to choose to start a new life right here and right now. And I believe that it is in your heart to say yes to that. Because I believe that God planted you to be here. And I believe that God planted that sacred yes within your heart to choose to be transformed, and through that be the transformation that the world has been seeking, the world has been requesting and needing. Because I know that as I continue to do my work, it invites me to be more of who I came here to be with others, and to be in connection, not only with the divine within me, but the divine that is expressing as each and every single person in this room, each and every single person in humanity. Now, Jesus, whether you call him your master teacher, whether you see him as an elder brother, I don't know why, but I also thought to add, maybe we just see him as a holy dude. But he came to tell us and to show us that he wasn't the exception, but that he was the great example that his story can be our story too. Actually, his story is our story. What we get to do is choose whether we want to see it in that light, that his ministry was our ministry, and that the miracles that he created, that he performed, the miracle that he was, are the miracles that are within us as divine potential, just waiting to be liberated and freed up from all of the ways in which we have put stones on its way, entombed who we truly are. We've hidden it from ourselves, and we've hid from it. Because it really takes bravery, it takes courage to be the light that God has asked us to be in the world. It takes courage, it takes being brave to be that living grace by which all of humanity, ourselves included, are lifted up. And so this is why, for me, it's such an important thing that we are celebrating the risen Christ. Because Jesus came to show us that with faith and in God, nothing can keep us down. Nothing can keep us down. With faith in God, in us, there is nothing greater that can keep us from our good. There is nothing greater than the power of God that is in us and as us and in our lives. And we are being called, I believe, not only to be alive to this new way of being, we are being called not to worship Jesus, but to live in remembrance of the truth that he came to teach. To be courageous in our lives is to embrace our Christhood. And I love Anne Lamott speaks about what it means to be out in the world in faith. She says, faith is not how we feel, it is how we live. And this morning I ask you, how are you living faith? How are you expressing your faith? And how do you want your faith to shine forth from you in the days ahead, in your life ahead of this moment that we already claim to be a sacred, holy, and powerful moment that can change your life like this? Now, Easter is not so much a celebration of a man rising from the dead, at least not here in Unity. It is a recognition that the Christ within is always, always bursting forth from the tomb. That the Christ is always rising up above any sense of limitation, that the Christ is always rising up above any ignorance of how powerful we are and the power that God is in our lives, that the Christ is always rising up from what is apparent darkness into the light. And that no matter how hard we try, and some of us have tried pretty hard, you can't keep a good light down. That light will shine forth. And so how can we just no longer fight it? How can we just embrace the light that we are, that Christ that is risen in us, and really just allow it to be? Embrace the destiny of that light in us and no longer fight that destiny. Easter is really a reminder to keep on keeping on. No matter how challenging it may feel, no matter the darkness that we may seem to be living in, or regardless of the experiences that not only us, but humanity is having in what many consider the dark night of the soul for so many. And so how can we step more fully into this? Eric Butterworth, Unity minister, said this about Easter. Easter says to everyone, no matter what challenges you may be facing in your life, you can go through them, even grow through them, and no tomb of human despair can hold you back. Nothing that we ourselves have put in the way of expressing our light can contain that light. No tomb can hold us back, and no stone can stay in our way. One of the things that I love about the story of when the women went to the tomb. So on Easter morning, the women came, they wanted to anoint Jesus' body. And as they were walking to the tomb, they actually had a conversation with themselves. And it says that they asked themselves, well, wait a minute, who's going to roll away that big old stone? But you see, they didn't have to. Because the moment that they were there, they were willing to step into that path. And the moment that they were willing to do it, God had already rolled away the stone. Christ had already done that for them. And so it's a reminder that whatever challenge we may be going through, whatever experiences that may be difficult for us, we don't have to fix it ourselves. We have to, and we get invited to surrender to the power of the Christ that is within. And let that show up, grow up in it, and be able to be expressed so that the stones are rolled out for us as we surrender to the truth of our being. But we have to choose to do so. We have to choose to surrender, and we have to choose to live from the place of the Christ. And we must be willing to meet that Christ light and to wake up and to show up from that space. Now, Christ had been entombed. The light that he was seemed to have been blocked by a stone, but that can never last. The shadows never last. The darkness is always overcome. And regardless of whether we could see the light was there. And nothing could diminish that light, regardless of how many times we've tried or the world has tried to diminish it for us. As Ralph Waldo Emerson said, the shadows in our lives are caused by us standing in the way of one's own sunshine. How have we stopped ourselves from fully living in the sunshine that we are? How have we created some shadows? And today is the day that we can just surrender those shadows, surrender those stones, and allow the Christ light that we are, that is risen in us, to be fully embodied and be what moves us from any sense that there is power or anything that can keep us in the darkness from being in the light. See, shadows do not last, and seeming darkness never lasts. And the beautiful thing about it is that it allows us to just be open to being who we've come here to be, to remember that God's light is a constant in our lives, and we must be willing to welcome it and embrace it and shine it forth. Isaiah chapter 60, verse 1 says, "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you." Easter is a celebration of the story of Jesus' life and ministry, and it is a sacred trinity that actually takes place. It is a trinity of the crucifixion, the resurrection, and the ascension. We sometimes forget about the ascension. We get so caught up in crucifixions of our lives and the resurrections of our lives that we forget that the third part of that is the ascension into a higher level of awareness, into our oneness with God, fully being embraced by us. And so we talk about the crucifixion and the dying of the old ways of being, and the crossing over of that which doesn't serve us any longer, and the crossing of anything that has kept us from playing small. And we talk about the resurrection, that Christ light risen in us, being reborn into our Christhood, and a different way of knowing just how amazing and beautiful and worthy and sacred we are. But there is the ascension, where Jesus ascends into heaven, to that higher state of consciousness that knows heaven and earth are possible. Heaven in earth is possible. Can you hold the vision, even when you are in those moments of being in the tomb, even in those moments where the stones may seem like they're so difficult to push? Can you surrender to the higher vision of knowing that not only is there a resurrection, but there is an ascension taking place? And the moment that we ascend, we take all of us with each other. One of the beautiful things about what Jesus did after the resurrection is that, I guess he could have just ascended, right? Like, he could have just been like, all right, done my job. I'm going to ascend after the resurrection. He didn't do that. He actually stayed a while with his followers, with the apostles, and with the disciples. Because I believe that he not only needed to show up in that miracle and to show up in his resurrection and being reborn in that Christ nature that he is, but that he also needed to testify to the power of God. He needed to show up for all those people and say, with God, this is even possible. With God, nothing can keep us in the darkness. With God, nothing that has been entombed can last in the tomb, because it's going to push right through. And we can just start to be the living embodiment of testifying to the power of God risen in us. And we get to then choose to ascend. But to ascend, we have to shine our light. It's not enough to just know it for ourselves, keep it for ourselves, as Jesus shared with us, because when he went to the apostles, he also told them that they also needed to go out into the world and proclaim the good news, to go out into the world and shine their light, to be the Christ in the world. And that is what we have all been commissioned to do also. And I believe that the commission is so that we can all ascend to heaven here on earth, to know that it's not only a possibility, but to know that it is where we are meant to live. It is what we are meant to experience. And so, how many of you are willing to be courageous, to be brave, to allow God's grace to testify through your life, through your actions, through your relationships, through the ways in which you show up liberated as the Christ presence and essence in all that you do? How many of you are done with war? How many of you are done with discrimination, with judgment, with prejudice, with resentments, with anger, with hurt, with pain? How many of you are done with that? Then in order for us to move beyond that, we have to shine our light. In those experiences where the seeming darkness is, there we are to bring our light to it, to be that living testimony of the power of God, the good as our lives. And I tell you, and you've experienced this before, anytime that you have overcome, anytime that you have allowed yourself to live in the light and not stay in the darkness, to not allow the challenges or difficulties to get the best of you, and you have allowed yourself to shine brightly forth from that experience, you've been a blessing to others, because the stories about how you overcame becomes the survival guides for others to know. We have to remember, or I invite you to remember, that we are the space where God is. We are the space where God is, and our lives are the place where God is expressed. Marianne Williamson says, God doesn't send us into the light. God sends us into the darkness that there may be light. We are that light. We are that expression. We are that risen Christ. It's not about somebody else 2,000 years ago. We do this to honor and to remember the truth of that experience, but only so that we can own it for ourselves, that we can embody it, and that we can be inspired into it. Christ in us is the light of the world. Jesus, in his I am affirmations, said, I am the light of the world. That was his own Christ nature speaking it out. How many times can we, in moments of challenge and difficulty, step back from it and affirm, I am the light. I am that Christ light. You know, being reborn into that Christ light is taking it on, right? It's like putting it on, allowing yourself to fully be immersed in it and allow that light to be immersed in you. See, the two may have felt pretty dark in that moment where Jesus was in there. Maybe we couldn't see that the light was still in there, and it was. Just like sometimes we're not able to fully acknowledge how sacred and holy and beautiful we are, it doesn't change the fact that we are. Just because we can't fully acknowledge that we have come here to be the light of the world doesn't mean it ain't so. And so how can we today choose to live from that place? Martha Smock says, for the moment, life may look dark, but the Christ light in you, the eternal light of spirit, is clearly shining even in the darkness. This light makes a way for you. Today is the day that we make a way to experience the light more fully. Now, one of the things that I've been sitting with is the story of the butterfly. And I don't know about you, but I have never met a butterfly that hasn't had to go through a cocoon, that hasn't needed to move into a cocoon. And yes, it may feel lonely sometimes in that cocoon. It may feel like there's darkness, but guess what? What's in there is transformation. It is the energy of being transformed into what we have come here to be. It is the energy and the consciousness of transformation that is there to move us from a place of crawling like the caterpillars into flying like the butterfly. How many of us can say we are done with crawling like the caterpillar? We are ready to take flight. And it's time that we truly embrace that we really allow that light to be what lifts us up, to not only liberate us, but make us so light that the wind is able to pick us up and bring us to that higher level of consciousness that we are all seeking to experience life through us. Christ is risen in us, and now we get to live that Christhood. And through that, not only will we experience our miracles, but that's how we become miracles in the lives of others. And I don't know about you, but I'm not only here to experience miracles. I want all people to experience miracles. I want all people to experience blessings. I want all people to know that they are sacred and worthy. And that is the power of us owning our truth. We are that amazing grace. We are the ways in which God's grace is made known in the world. And being willing to be that grace is brave. You are what we honor and celebrate today. Easter may be the basis for us coming together in celebration. The resurrection of Jesus may be what brought you to be in this moment, but we are the risen Christ. We are the expressions of God here and now, and we are grace itself. And so this Easter, I really invite you not only to rise up, but to shine forth your light. To rise up from the suffering that results from thinking that we are separate from God and each other, and shine forth the light of oneness and unity. To rise up from the erroneous belief that we are unworthy, and we shine forth the light that we are all God's children, sacred, worthy, and holy. To rise up from the belief that we are victims, and shine forth the light that says that we are the ones who have come to light up the world, and that light is never diminished. To rise up from resentments, anger, hurt, and to shine forth love, peace, and grace. To rise up from our slumber, our cocoon, and shine forth an awakened life. To rise up from the crawling and to shine forth flying high. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 8 says, "For once you were darkness, but now in the Lord you are light. Live as children of light." This is the amazing grace that we have come here to be. This is the unfailing love that we have come to express and to give to each other. We are the grace of God in this world, and today I invite you to not only rise up, but to show up and shine forth your light. Hallelujah. Christ's light is in us.
Yes.
Namaste.
Woo!
Thank you so much for visiting our YouTube channel. We post new videos every week to keep you positive, present, and inspired to your divinity. Please click on the subscribe button below and also that notification bell. Remember to share this with your friends and your family, those that you know will be inspired just like you have been. And always remember that we love you, that we bless you, that we behold the Christ in you, and we see you doing great things. Thanks and take care.